All right, I'm doing a little recording here. I don't know if this is going to become content, but I figured that I don't know. I'm going to do a little riff. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I don't know. I just felt like recording some audio. So I want to talk about my experience with making stuff on the internet, with being a creator and trying to be a creative and maintaining the tension or dealing with the tension between those two things, because they're not the same thing. On the creative side, it's like I have the desire to work and to play, right? And to surf on the waves, to write things, to code things, to figure things out, to solve puzzles, whether that is happening in writing essays, books, doing paintings, working on games, writing software, like whatever form that it takes. There's like the creative impulse to make things simply because I'm interested, because I care, right? And, I could triple underscore something like what Rick Rubin talks about in The Creative Act, where, it's like really being an artist is just taking that thing that you see that others don't and just, digging into that. So it's you first, audience second in his estimation. And I would agree with that on the creative side. On the creator side, though, you have these issues of business. You have these issues of speaking to people, of making content that is packaged and presented in such a manner that it will be successful in this game of, competing for attention online, whether that's in a YouTube video, LinkedIn, Instagram, doesn't really matter what it is, Twitter, a personal blog, a podcast. And the fact of the matter is, even if you are incredibly, what would you say? Even if you're sort of gripped by your own ideas and your own thoughts, you're like, this is fascinating. Why isn't everybody obsessed with this? If you present it clumsily, or if it's just you riffing and you don't have the frame of an interesting person. So for instance, like, if like Elon Musk, farts into a microphone and posts it on X, that's obviously going to get 20 million hits and everybody's going to love it because of his frame, because of who he is, because of his context. If I, frankly, as a nobody, as a non-celebrity, as somebody who hasn't built, $14 billion companies or whatever the fuck, do that, even if I think it's the most interesting thing in the whole wide world, nobody's going to show up, right? And so it is my responsibility as a business owner, as a business person, and as an artist to package my stuff and present my stuff in such a manner that people actually show up, consume it, share it, engage with it, etc. Right? So having said that, this is an explanation for why I don't post, and I'll explain the reasoning behind this, and also why I'm trying to shake this. But basically, I probably don't post 95% or 99% of my thoughts on social media because a lot of them are just too out there. They're too esoteric. They're too niche. And I think more of it is that I don't have the right frame to talk about some of the things that grip me. Like if I wanted to riff for 45 minutes about the allocation of detail in a painting and how some people are able to capture what looks like this insane amount of detail with these abstractions, these abstract shapes that when you zoom in aren't really the thing that it's supposed to be, right? Where, the eye is represented with slaps and dashes and with tone, and you zoom in on it and you're like, that's not an eye. And then you zoom out and you're like, wait a minute, but it reads as one, right? I could riff on that for hours. I often talk about this on my website. Problem is, I post a YouTube video on that. I post a short, not interesting. If somebody people recognize to be an excellent painter riffs on even a very superficial version of what I just said for 15 seconds, that short could do hundreds of thousands of views because that person's frame is superior to my own. And that's something I think about a lot. Like, I don't think my problem is that I don't have interesting ideas. I think my problem is that, like, people don't know who I am. I don't have the social proofing. I don't have the credibility. And the fact of the matter is, like, if you're a celebrity or if you're really, really good and people know you and trust you, they will distort whatever it is you're saying as being much more interesting than it might actually be objectively. So why am I changing my mind on this? Well, I know that I need to post more. I had an interview recently with Kuno. I made a video on that I posted on my Psy-Or or Psychic Orgy YouTube channel recently. And one of the things that we talked about is posting on social media, changing your relationship with social media, and basically just getting your reps in, posting your good, posting your bad, developing a skill, and then changing your relationship with social media in the sense of focusing more on the 1% of people or the 0.1% of people that actually move needles in your audience or in your potential audience, right? The people that you actually want to connect with. So it's not about the 99% of people that are casual followers that show up because you drew a big titty anime girl. It's about the people that are really engaged and interested in your thoughts, in what you're doing, in the pursuit that you're on, because they have some deeper understanding of this journey that you're taking with your work. They see what you're trying to build. They see the greater context, the bigger picture that everything falls into. And most people either don't see it or frankly, they don't give a shit, right? And that's fine because it's actually not for them. And so for me personally in my business now, not only do I not aspire to be an influencer, it's very presumptuous of me to even think that I could be one, but I don't aspire to that in part because most influencers are not that rich. Like what I aspire to is having enough money to retire myself, retire my parents at a young age, and like go do paintings and like make games and do the stuff that I really want to be doing, learn 7 languages. I want to liberate myself. I want to own my time. And so although this art business is something that I would probably want to build anyway, I am still thinking about it in terms of how am I building this so that at some later point I can liberate myself and own my time and do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, wherever I want, right? Now, I know everybody probably wants some version of that to some degree, but I think 99% of people don't really get specific. They don't think it's possible. They don't actually strategize or study or train or do anything to actually cultivate the life that they think that they want or that they say that they want. And so, again, not to pat myself on the back, but that is something that I'm trying to do actively, is like actually really take that seriously. And, that's a journey that I've been on for a really long time, many, many years. So this is not something that I just, came to last week or something. This is probably 10 or 15 years of strife and of trying a million times and failing and trying some more and getting knocked down, getting up and dusting myself off again. And, even before that, into my childhood, really, I was, I think, always aimed towards something like that, always aimed towards something sort of entrepreneurial, on a path that really hadn't been walked yet by anybody else. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit is AI. And I want to talk about how I've used it. I want to talk about, which might be a turnoff to some people because I know artists are terrified of AI. The fact of the matter is, and I'm going to put this in context, I do not use AI particularly, right? What would you say? I don't use AI to make audio. I don't use AI to make art. I don't use AI to make content. I use AI specifically to bounce ideas with somebody that is outside of myself, that's not my friend, and that's not like another artist, because I want to see things from a different perspective. And what I like about the AI that I've experimented with, and in this case, it's going to be Claude Sonnet, I think that's how you say it, is that it's basically a much better Google search with an opinion, right? Where it can actually like tell you what it thinks about your ideas. It can kind of give me notes and ideas about opportunities or angles I may not have thought of. That's one of the ways in which I use it. Now, what I wanted to talk about more broadly is I'm really not interested in an AI company or in using AI to make myself money, even though I see the opportunity for that. And the simple reason is I don't think that's a long-term game. Now, some people are going to roll their eyes, much like with crypto, and they're going to be like, you don't get it. This technology is here to stay, blah, 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 blah. Here's my take. I'm not saying that AI won't transform the world. It will. I'm not saying AI won't make a lot of billionaires and eventually trillionaires. It will. You mark my words, or like bet your ass it will. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Assuming that the world exists 15 or 20 years from now, like it will mint a lot of very, very rich people, and it will change industries, flip them on their head completely. It's going to change the world. I have no doubt about that. The problem with AI is that it's sort of antithetical to what I actually do, because my edge is doing something that's very human, that's very one of a kind, that's not about being better, that's about being different. And the problem with AI is that it's so accessible and it is so trained on mainstream data that what really begins to happen is people over-rely on it, and their thinking tends to blend more with what the AI is saying. And what does that lead to? It leads to more homogeneity, right? Things become more and more similar, more homogenous. Everybody starts sounding the same. You can see this if you spend 5 minutes on LinkedIn looking at all the shitty AI-generated posts. They all sound sort of similar. They're all formatted identically. That's incredibly boring. And the problem is anybody can show up, anybody can use these tools and pay X amount of money per month, throw some bullet points into it, vomit a storyline into it, and have the AI shit something out. I'm not interested in that because it lacks all of the depth and all of the quirkiness and the personality that the stuff I've cultivated over years of actually living a real person's life, right? So, in my art, in my writing, in my struggles creatively, in my pursuit of polymathism, which is something nobody talks about or thinks about because it's very esoteric. AI can't riff on any of these things because they're on the edge, right? And this is what people don't get about AI, is that AI is an expert in what was. It's not very good at innovating, inventing the future, because it doesn't have enough data by definition to be able to describe or have any good answers for anything that's happening on the edges, right? Anything that's new, anything that you've come up with yourself, anything that only 10 people or 100 people really know about. AI is not going to give you a good answer on these things. It's going to be very informed, very uninteresting. And so that's why I'm not really interested in AI, because if you're any good, and more importantly, if you're actually leaning into what makes you unique and looking at your own unfair advantages, you can use AI to bolster your humanity and your unfair advantages. But if you vomit your creativity into AI and then you simply post whatever the AI makes onto a social media platform and say, this is my content, you're really missing the point of these tools. Because what makes the creative process so special is actually that you grappled with it. It's that you were there, you did the thinking, you did the hard work, you did the agonizing. And not just because of the storyline, but because that process of grappling, that process of going to war, this war between the self, between the resistance that somebody like Stephen Pressfield talks about, and actually making something meaningful and really wrestling with that, that's actually what creates beautiful things. And the problem is that when you utilize AI to make content, to make stuff for you, you lose that, right? You're completely losing that process of grappling. And that's actually where all of the magic happens. So I'm not anti-AI. I'm not a Luddite. I don't think AI is necessarily going to destroy the world, or I certainly hope not. Try to do our best to hopefully steer AI insofar as I'm able to do that in a positive direction, when we do, or try to use it in positive, ethical ways. But AI is just, it's not, even when it gets a lot smarter, it's always maybe going to be something like a collaborator for me, because I think it's useful sometimes to help me think through things. But ultimately, I always want to go to war and put in the hours wrestling with things and figuring out what I think and having conversations with smart people, because there's always something that's going to be in my head or in the heads of interesting people at the level of experience that AI is never, ever, never going to be able to capture, even if you train it on 500 essays that you've written. It can make something that sounds like you. The problem is that if you change your mind about something or have an epiphany, or you're trying to invent something that doesn't exist yet, AI is not really going to be all that helpful. Right? Now, again, I know that there's plenty of people that would push back against what I just said. There's plenty of gaps in my argument. I'm not saying that AI is incapable of helping you come up with new ideas either. I'm simply saying that AI should be a collaborator, but that you shouldn't try to outsource the actual war of art, because that is where the magic happens. That's what I'm actually saying. So, let's see. We talked about AI, we talked about social. I guess, the other thing, and I already kind of touched on this with my art business, is that I'm really struggling right now with what levers to pull. And what I mean by that is what I really need to happen right now is what's the fastest way for me to put myself in a position where I can make decent money and where I can spend the maximum amount of time and energy on this business that I'm building. Because the fact of the matter is, the closer that I can get to going all in on this 7 days a week and being refreshed and being well slept and so on and so forth, the better. It's not linear, and I'm not even going to get into that. But it's like the difference between 2 days a week and 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5. It's not linear at all, right? Anybody that's ever worked on anything creative will know what I'm talking about. So that's sort of something that you'd have to figure out by actually doing. But yeah, I'm trying to create opportunities for myself. And again, jumping back to what I was saying about social, I've been following this creator, Grace Andrews, who was one of the big players at Diary of a CEO. And again, whether or not you like Diary of a CEO or X, Y, and Z, you have to admit that they are extremely, extremely good at the game that they're playing. And so she's been doing like vlog-ish style content on YouTube. I've been watching basically all of those. And normally it's not a style of content that I would consume. I've never been a vlog person. Normally the babbly girl blogs where they like play with their hair and do makeup, talk about their day, don't interest me because I probably don't sound like a person that would be interested in that. But if you can sort of tolerate that, tolerate isn't really the right word, but if you can sort of suspend that for a moment, she actually delivers a lot of value. And one of the things that's been nice for me is that it's actually been really useful to see what it's like for an entrepreneur, creator entrepreneur, to actually like build and describe their strategy and how they think about stuff and what they're doing in real time. And actually see somebody that's like done it before that knows what they're doing go from 0 to 1 in real time is fucking huge. I think some people do it badly, and I'm not going to name names. I think the building in public thing can definitely be a meme, but when it's done well, it can be totally fucking awesome. And if you follow a couple people like this and they don't have to be in your industry, like make no mistake, they don't have to be doing what you're doing. And in fact, I would argue or go so far as to say, if you're doing the right thing, there shouldn't be almost anybody in the world that is doing exactly what you're doing, right? If you find yourself in a circumstance where there's, 30,000 other people trying to build the same thing that you're building, you're probably doing the wrong thing, right? And I can confidently say that unless you're already successful, unless you're listening to me say that and you're making $50K a month right now doing some AI business and you're like, what the fuck are you talking about, right? I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the people that have been struggling, fumbling and bumbling around for 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 years or 20 years trying to make stuff and finding that it never seems to work out because somebody else always comes along and does it better and smarter and sharper than you. That's because you're choosing businesses that you think will make you money or that you think are good business opportunities that are low conviction, where you don't actually have any unfair advantages or a timing advantage, an analytical advantage, a positional advantage, a network advantage, however you want to think about that. You're going into a market after somebody on a big podcast says that it's a great idea, right? And if Cody Sanchez is telling you it's a great idea, that means everybody's already doing it. Doesn't mean you can't make money, but it means it's not a blue ocean anymore. So I would encourage people that are artists and creatives in particular to think about, okay, I want to make art, which should be personal. It should be unique. I should be offering a unique value. Here's the problem. And this is something else I need to riff on in the art world. The art world is a-changing, right? Times are a-changing, as Steve Jobs loved to say, right? I always have to reference that. And I think a lot of people are caught up in what the economy is doing for good reasons because it's so hard to get a job. And a lot of people that love to draw or to make, arts and crafts, or that love to sculpt or whatever it may be creatively that it is that you do or write. And they're looking for jobs. They're going on LinkedIn. They're, sending out resumes, doing the shotgun approach. They're doing the DMing, the cold pitching. They're posting content in the hopes that somebody will offer them a job that allows them to achieve escape velocity. This perfect job where you get X, however much per month, $5K a month, whatever it is for where you live and for your fixed costs, right? Your cost of living. That's just going to be fun all the time, and you're going to work with awesome, super smart, right? They're looking for this perfect job to just kind of fall in their lap. And what I would say, not everybody needs to be an entrepreneur, but I would want people to consider that if you really want to be in control of your creativity, one of the opportunities we have now that we didn't have 15 years ago or 20 years ago is we have social media. We have these tools that allow individuals, that allow solopreneurs like myself to go out there, to network, to build things, to make our own website in, an hour or two instead of days or weeks or months of programming and all this other type of stuff. You have so many tools at your disposal. The last thing that I want you to do in this red ocean of everybody vying for attention on the internet with their own thing is go out and do exactly what everybody else is doing. What you should, and this is bold of me to say, but what you should try to do is what's your unique edge? Because if you're a painter, a lot of people think what they offer is I'm a good painter. That's not value. You know why? Because there's hundreds or thousands or maybe more, depending on your skill level, of people out there that are just as good as you are technically or better, that are friends or cousins or networked with and connected with studios or with people that can give them jobs whenever they want. And that means you're screwed, right? So you basically have two options. Either you become infinitely more technically proficient, which realistically takes months or years of hard work. It's not something I've ever seen anybody do. I mean, again, there's the the clickbait thumbnail type stuff where, somebody's like, I got really good in 2 days. But those are people that have been drawing for 20 years that like have bad practicing habits, right? Where they change a behavior and they get a lot better executionally because they already had the dexterity and the eye. They just didn't know how to apply it, right? That's what's actually going on there. You look at somebody like PewDiePie or something where it's like, it looks like he got good very quickly. It looks like he got good very quickly because he developed his eye, he developed his dexterity, he was practicing daily, and he was copying, right? If I took PewDiePie right off of the very squeaky clean, perfectly edited YouTube setup and handed him a paintbrush and said, like, paint a beautiful figure in the style of Morgan Weisling in an hour using these materials without a reference, he would not know how to place an eye, right? And I'm not saying that to insult him. I mean, I think what he did was awesome. This is no shade thrown on him is what I'm saying, but like, I probably couldn't do that, right? So it's like, it's not that simple, right? Like art is very hard. A lot of these creative endeavors are very hard. So what else can you do? You should become more technically proficient. But one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is this idea. And again, this is not my idea. People riff on this from time to time of different is better than better. But what I would encourage more people to do is really think about what that means and really think about how you can apply it uniquely in your own situation. Like, what is the unique value add that you're offering, right? Because maybe you're, an intermediate level artist, but there's something else, that you've been doing, right? Like there's some other job that you have. There's something else in your life that's going on that gives you a special advantage. Like, maybe, and this is just an example, right? Like maybe, you've got like a family and you've got a full-time job and you became a proficient artist and you can spend time telling people how you were able to juggle those different things and still find time to train in art, for example. Maybe you can make that part of your pitch, part of your tagline, part of your sell on your website or something like that. Because, and the reason I'm pointing this out is because I've spent a lot of time in this space. And here's the other thing I want to leave you off with, because a lot of people in podcasts say what I'm saying right now, so you might be rolling your eyes. Like, dude, everybody's talking about this. One thing I don't hear anybody point out is really this. There's a lot of business opportunities that are out there right now that you can't see because you're so cynical about the state of the economy and about people's willingness to buy stuff. But let me tell you something, right? That idea that I just brought up, like I want you right now to do a Google search, and to pull up AI and to like do whatever it is that you need to do and spend 20 minutes looking for the top person out there that helps artists that are busy, that have young kids, that have full-time jobs, figure out how to actually train art efficiently. And I will promise you, you're not going to find anything. And that should blow your mind because that's obvious. We just came up with that in 2 seconds. Like you would think there'd be 800 different people out there, from page, 1 to page 35 with businesses like that. And there aren't any, right? That blows my mind. The business that I'm building, which I can say a little bit about because you couldn't copy me if you wanted to, where I'm interviewing artists in the East, in Japan, in Korea, in China, etc. Obviously, I'm interviewing a lot of digital artists in general. And one of the things that I've been thinking about doing is facilitating brand deals between artists in the East and connecting them with an international market. Now, why is it interesting? Well, it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it actually doesn't really exist. And you might say, what about these examples? I promise you, it doesn't exist the way you think it exists. There's a lot of people that like pretend like that's what they do, but that's not actually what they do. Why? Because most brands and companies with money that could actually fund these people aren't really artists. They're people that are in suits, that don't draw, that don't paint, that don't understand the needs of artists because they're not actually artists. They couldn't tell you the first thing about, gesture or about perspective or form or this, or they don't know anything. They don't understand artists at the level of personality. They don't really know how to connect with them. They don't know how to do business with artists in a way that won't scare them away, because artists and money are like fucking oil and water a lot of the time. Like, artists want to make money, but most artists are very anxious about money because what they really want to be doing is painting. And most artists are incredibly turned off by the idea of making money from being sponsored by a company that sells paper, right? A lot of people don't, like, again, if you're an artist, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But what you have to understand is that, like, the suits that have the money to pay those people's bills and give them a successful career don't actually know how to connect with those people. So there's a huge gap here, a huge arbitrage opportunity. Maybe I'll do podcasts on this type of stuff, like on My First Million for art stuff, because I feel like there's actually a huge opportunity here as well. Like, the problem is, like, most of the people doing art content in the art world are they're creative, so they can riff about like how to place an eye or about how to do the Loomis method or the Asaro head or, whatever it might be, but they, how to select good oil paints, but they don't really know anything about business. Really good artists work with business people because they don't like business. There are very few people in the space like myself who came from writing, who came from business, who came from a more entrepreneurial background that got into art later. Because again, like my background is in meta learning. It's in, a long history of sort of weird, like solopreneur entrepreneurship stuff, but it's always been like how to merge creativity and business. And the fact that that's a game that I've been playing since I was like in middle school gives me a weird edge that basically nobody else has. So again, not that I'm worried about other people like doing my idea. I would actually be over the moon if other people started doing this idea, because that would actually be good for me, because then I would just email you and say, hey, I want to work together. So we wouldn't really be competing, but that's the other thing. And actually that's another thing I want to bring up. There are lots of business ideas that like artists should be starting or like trying to figure out how to start. But the other thing that I would say is networking is such a superpower, because other people in your space, by and large, especially artists, one of the biggest things that I found networking with artists is that they're so generous, they're so nice, they're so willing to say yes to stuff. Like I reached out to Christian Nee. A lot of you probably know, right? He's been interviewing a bunch of different artists. He's got like the Peter Hahn interview. He's interviewed like Marshall Vandruff, different people from Proco, lots of like big names, people that you would know. I'm almost tempted to like pull him up here, because I know that there was an interview that he did recently, Alpe Fa. I was watching that one, Slew. There was another one. Here we go. Greg Broadmoor. I couldn't remember his name. But yeah, a lot of people know him. I reached out to him just like out of the blue on his little Discord community, right? I'll explain why I did it that way in a second. But like, I was like, hey, can I interview you, or do you want to like connect and chat? And he was like, sure, right? We could do that. I didn't even have to, I just asked him like, can I DM you? And then like 2 minutes later, I messaged him again, and then like the next day, because he got busy, I reached out and he was like, yeah. So like that, I didn't do any work. Like, I didn't need to go take a 1,000-hour masterclass on networking. I didn't have to write a pitch. I didn't even tell him the stuff that I had done. I didn't even say like, this is who I am, this is who I've spoken to. I just asked him if I could interview him for a thing. I just said, I'm interviewing artists. And he was like, sure, sounds good, right? People are missing this opportunity. Like, the number of people that are out there right now doing that is so little. Like, these people are not your competitors. These people are your friends. Okay. So like, leverage, again, in a positive, ethical way, leverage this by like, reach out to people, ask them, interview people, collab with people, go into business with people, because there are people that know a lot more than you or that have complementary skill sets, and you can build really interesting things, have fun, and make money while you do this stuff, right? Now, again, this is at a stage because I've pivoted a lot in this business. So full disclosure, I'm not like making a bunch of money with this right now. This is in the stage before I've made money, but like, I have to tell you, just the sheer level of opportunity and like the doors that are starting to open as I build this are immense, right? Like I've connected with people that have hundreds of thousands, millions of people in their audiences just by like reaching out and asking. And yeah, I spent hundreds of hours or thousands of hours learning how to pitch. What I've realized, especially in the art world, is that people get pitched so infrequently in the manner that I am pitching them that the bar is really low. And that's another thing I want to mention, is that probably the biggest thing that I learned is it's not so much about how you pitch people or what you say or how you position yourself. That does matter sometimes. I'm not going to say it doesn't. A lot of it is just picking the right channel, right? Like a low volume channel that you know that person checks. And I'm sharing this so the volume of people doing this type of stuff will increase. So this is technically bad for me, but I'm sharing it because it's important. Yeah, a lot of people are on their Twitter like 97 times a day, or on their Instagram, and they have their DMs open. And guess what? Nobody is sending them high quality messages, giving them value and like pitching them on interesting things that they'd want to be involved in via their X. They get poorly written emails from people that they don't know with bad subject lines that get lost in an inbox where they're getting pinged, 5,000 times a day. And then you get butthurt when you don't get a response. What you got to do instead is go into the low volume channels and send high quality messages. Also, another thing, this is kind of obvious. Shorter is better. If you have to make a decision between like having a longer bio and like bragging more, always say less. And in fact, this is kind of like a Robert Greene technique, but people by and large will be more curious if you plant a nugget of something that's really interesting and don't elaborate on it. Like if I just say like, hey, interviewing artists right now, connected with people with 6-7 digit audiences, would you be open to an interview? That's almost more interesting because I didn't say who I am. I didn't say what my brand or business is. I didn't say who they were. So now they have questions, right? And even if they don't answer you right away, that's going to linger in their brain, right? When they go off and they're doing the dishes, right? When they go off to run some errands, when they go to bed, they're going to be like, who was that person that reached out to me? I gotta go look at that. And then all of a sudden at 11:15 p.m., right, when they're going to bed, they're now in the DMs with you, answering you and being like, yeah, it sounds awesome, right? And it sounds stupid. It sounds crazy, but like it's a huge opportunity that people don't do. And it's so easy. The other thing I will say, because I know a lot of creatives out there are introverts. They're like, oh, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not building anything. Don't let the fact that you don't have a business or a website or a portfolio, or even not being a great artist, because I'm not really a great artist. I'm okay. I'm like intermediate. I haven't trained enough, frankly. There's a lot better that I can get. I'm not that great of an artist. I would fancy myself a decent writer, a decent networker. You don't need to have a website or a great portfolio or like work at Pixar as a lead concept, right? You don't need any of that stuff. It's not about that. The best way to get a response and be interesting to these people is to be interested, right? Like actually, and I know this is kind of cliche, but like you have to show people that you've done your homework, right? So if your thought process is like, man, I would really love to connect with this person, you need to know something about them, right? Like connect with people that you actually know something about, that you'd actually want to connect with, whom you can ask for something simple and specific and also give value to. One of the things you have to understand, and I mean, I could probably riff for another hour here, so I might wrap this up soon, but one of the things you got to realize is interviewing somebody is actually giving value to that person. Why? Because you might say, well, that person has a large audience and I have a tiny audience, so there's an imbalance, right? There is, but think of it this way. Like everybody likes to talk about themselves, like mostly. Most like great artists don't really get to riff on like what they're thinking about, what they do on their personal journey. People love that shit. People love being asked good questions by smart, curious people. A big advantage that you might have if you're starting out is that you're starting out and that person wants nothing more. And you might not realize this, right? But a lot of very experienced, like veteran people really want to help people that are where they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. They really want to, but they don't have the outlet because they don't have a podcast or people reaching out to them for that type of stuff, or like the right person to do it with. And they don't have the time in many cases to like facilitate that. So what do? You come in and it's like, I'll handle all the technical stuff, all the hard stuff. You just sit down, I'll ask you questions. We'll have a fun conversation. And then not only are they serving that itch that they have to help others, you're also kind of massaging their ego, right? Because now they're flattered that you're talking about them, they're asking all these questions, and you're building both of your audiences because they're getting more exposed if that video does well. And now you're getting credibility and social proof and the Lollapalooza of cognitive biases. That's an idea that comes from Charlie Munger. I'm not going to get into that. You can Google it. The Lollapalooza of these different things. It basically like that frame I was talking about earlier, right? Now you're building the frame. Now people are taking you seriously, right? Like a good example of this, and this is writing, would be like David Perell. Like I have no idea who David Perell is, but I know one thing, that David Perell sits down with Howard Marks, you know, who I love. He sits down with Mark Andreessen. He sits down with Robert Greene. He sits down with all of these phenomenal writers, investors, thinkers as recline, right? Whether you like them or not, like these are really good thinkers and writers, very successful people. And like immediately, the way he commands respect in those conversations, like you're sitting there like, who is this guy? Is he a billionaire? Is he the king of the world? Like, who is he? How does he get these guests on? Immediately, like his status, his credibility, and his pull and leverage is multiplied every time he has somebody like this on, particularly when they have phenomenal conversations in like this high quality studio that he has, right? So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. Like anybody can do this type of stuff. And again, it doesn't have to be interviewing. That's not what I'm saying. Like you can reach out to people and just be like, and you'd be surprised, because I've done a lot of this too. You'd be surprised how often people just say yes. So never assume that somebody won't say yes. And if you're nervous, that's a good thing. That means the person you're pitching is out of your comfort zone. And that's what you want, because every time you reach out to somebody out of your comfort zone, you build this muscle. The nerves probably won't go away, but what you'll realize is that it's the same amount of work to pitch somebody that has 2 more followers than you as it is to pitch somebody with 1 million followers. The only difference is the amount of value you get, right? So that's really important to think about. But you can just ask a question like, hey man, love this piece that you did. Really curious about blah, 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 your color sense. You know, I've watched some of your Twitch streams. I've watched videos that you've done where you kind of dig into this. I had a specific question about blah, 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 blah. I know you're super busy, you know, it would mean the world to hear your thought. You'd be surprised how many people just answer you. And sometimes they don't answer right away. Sometimes they come back and you forget about it. It's like 4 months later and they're like, hey, I don't normally check my DMs. Yeah, I do A, B, and C. And all of a sudden you're talking to them and you like add them on Discord. So like never assume that you're going to get a no without actually trying. But anyway, this is going on for a long time. I don't know. I can always riff on this stuff for like hours and hours and hours. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I don't know how interesting stuff like this is because like, again, not to pat myself on the back, like I have the knowledge and the experience and nobody does a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about. Like I wish more people did this stuff, but I don't know how many people would click on this, listen to something like this for 40 minutes and like actually go out and do it. Like I'd love for people to just listen to this and be like, you know what? I'm going to take one of these ideas and just execute on it this month. Because I promise you, like everything will change if you do this enough times, right? And I guess that's the last thing I'll leave you off with is that like you need to rack up failures and rejections because your mistakes and your failures and the non-responses that you get are paying for you to get the yeses. And you only need one or a small handful of yeses to be very successful because one connection with a badass person could open 100 or 1,000 other doors in ways that you couldn't possibly imagine. And then once you have that credibility and that warm contact, you're having conversations with whoever you want, right? Because like people's networks in this digital age span across the world. You know, you get connected with one big artist. Like I talked to Kuno, his clients are like these gigantic AAA studios. You know, now that I'm connected with him, and you know, it sounds kind of silly, but it's also true. Like I can get connected with so many people. Like if there's somebody I want to reach out to at Riot or ZZZ or like any of these people, you know, he probably knows some of them and be like, hey, do you know so-and-so? I'd really love to ask them about A, B, and C. Could we, that's something pretty much only I can say at this point, like on planet Earth, like not to be like arrogant about this. I know there's other people out there, but it's a very small number of people that are doing this work in this industry for some reason. So I'm taking advantage of it. I think there's a gigantic opportunity here. And the other thing I will say, I know I keep saying This will be the last thing, but I'm over caffeinated. This is a growing market. In my particular niche, like anime art's a growing market. I would say art generally is a growing market. It's projected to grow by like tens of billions of dollars over the next decade. Why does that matter? Because I'm not playing a game where most people are going to get it today. Like if I told the average person what I'm doing in 2025, they'd be like, you're stupid. It's crazy. There's a horrible business. Why aren't you doing an AI app? Why aren't you doing this company? Why aren't you becoming an electrician? AI is going to take over the world, or whatever. Nobody's seeing this because I'm playing a game that's not going to get talked about for another 10 or 15 years. Like people aren't going to be talking about this today. We're going to be 8 years in and they're going to be talking about how it was so early. And it's like, the answer to that is, and I know this sounds very arrogant, but like the answer to that is like, I've been connected with this for my whole life. So I actually see the gaps in ways that other people don't. That is the benefit of going deep into things and being on the pulse of things and being on the cutting edge, is that you see things that are happening in these tiny, tiny corners of society that the rest of society is going to be talking about 15 years later, right? But anyway, I'll leave you with that. I could go on for another 17 hours, but I don't know what this is. Very rambly. Maybe I'll turn this into content. I don't know. But thanks for listening, I guess. See you soon.